Capacity Greetings to you all who have joined us for this Suppers Trust Policy Dialogue. Please support this program by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. At the outset, I want to say and thank you in the same vein for joining us as you have consistently, especially with respect to this subject of the Amendment number 3. Today we have come in a kind of an emergency, urgent, in the wake of the continuing violence against those opposed to this amendment. And we have here among the panelists Professor Lovemore Madhuku as both an illustration of the extent of the violence that has been meted out in a manner which appears to be state-condoned. And so one of our major objectives today in holding this emergency policy dialogue is to put a stop, to plead with the authorities to stop this wanton violence against civic leaders who are opposed to this amendment. We thought that after the kind of violence was meted out to Professor Madhuku and his colleagues on Sunday, we thought that they would relent, especially with the exposure of the extent to which the police, ZRP, were almost complicit in this act against Madhuku and his colleagues on Sunday. Instead, they have continued. This morning, Tendai Biti's office was barricaded virtually, his members of staff beaten up, and he managed to escape. And we hope he's safe wherever he is. But they wanted to get him. And to quote the report, they told him that what they did to Madhuku will be nothing when they're finished with him. That's how relentless they are in this. So in mentioning all this, we want to also in the same vein to appeal to the police, to Commissioner General Timba himself, that we have on several occasions warned you about this, beginning with the bomb attack at Sapes on October 27th, 28th of October, when I spoke to him myself the morning after and complained at the apparent correlation between the bomb attack and the conduct of the police the next morning at the gate at Sapes, which was really to prevent the press conference of civic leaders who were to express on behalf of all of us their abhorrence at the proposed amendment. Professor Madhuku showed very, 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 very comprehensively the extent of the complicit action of the police on Sunday, when some of them was sat there while he was being assaulted. And subsequently, members of the public identified some of the senior police officers involved in that violence against Professor Madhuku and his colleagues. And today, the police made no secret at all of the complicit behavior in the siege against BT, his office, and his colleagues today. We are appealing to the state authorities, the government, to put a stop to this. The second objective of this discussion is to appeal to the authorities to allow the public, the Zimbabwean people, to debate and express their views on this proposed amendment. And in doing so, we want to create a contrast between what's being done now, to the extent that people are being denied even a meeting in their own offices to discuss this amendment, while ZANU-PF is allowed to have their meetings across the country, regardless. And in doing so, I want to quote from the project document, the BBI document, authored by Jonathan Moyo and his colleagues. And the document, I think all of us should get a copy of it. Jonathan Moyo is the project leader and manager, the consultant, assisted by Glenn Mpani of Shikamo Political and Advisory Services as team manager and strategist. Among other things, the multimedia and communication strategy of that document states the following. I quote, "The interactive multimedia public engagement will also support and publicize the 11 outreach interfaces of the BB Parliamentary Select Committee, including," and I quote again, "by countering, drowning, crowding out, and disrupting negative narratives." That's what document is. And that's exactly what is happening. This is the strategy that Jonathan Moyo was recommending in that document. And only worse is happening. And the contrast with the Constitutional Commission, in which both Jonathan Moyo and myself were members of the executive. Just to recall, the Constitutional Commission was set up by Mugabe in 1999 to produce the draft constitution of 2000, which, as you know, was rejected by the people in the referendum. It was chaired by Judge President Godfrey Chijgawa, with 400 members of the public and all MPs. And the executive committee consisted of Chijgawa, as I've already said. The vice chairpersons were Grace Lupepe, Bishop Siachitema, and Professor Walter Kamba. I was head of finance and administration. Jonathan Moyo was head of media and the outreach program. And Jameson Mnangagwa was a justice minister and member of the executive committee, and so was Edson Zobo, the minister of that portfolio. But as you remember, this was a very interactive exercise which took us some 6 months, and in which the public was allowed to discuss, not to mention the constituent members of the commission itself. And I mentioned this because this is the sharp contrast between then and now. And one can also go back to the Constitutional Commission of 2013, where people were necessarily canvassed, people expressed their views, and there was a referendum. The contrast this time round is just too sharp. No referendum. Chinamasa says in his document last week, there will be no referendum, full stop. We have to highlight this, and in doing so, highlight the extent to which the Zimbabwean public has already rejected that amendment. And in doing so, we want to cite the position of the heads of Christian denominations in the document last week. I won't quote the whole document, but just part of it. Where is this? I quote, "The Church calls on members of Parliament to stand on firm moral ground and decline to endorse these amendments. The Church calls on the President to resist the temptation to amend the Constitution for selfish ends," end of quote. This is a very important statement. And it represents the generality of Zimbabwean people, church-going people. And when the church has spoken the way it has not only provided leadership, moral leadership, but it's also reflecting the views of the majority of Zimbabweans in this country. And on that note, I want to acknowledge the presence of Reverend Kenneth Mutata, who was former Secretary General of the Zimbabwe Council of Churches, and with whom we have worked over the years, and who remains a voice in his own personal capacity, but was also a member of the church in expressing, as he does often on social media, his views, which also reflect the views of those he ministers to as a minister of the church. And I want to start, therefore, with him. Reverend Kenneth Mutata, please.
Thank you very much, Professor Ibbo Madaza, and I very much want to appreciate this platform for policy dialogue you have opened, which has sustained itself over the years and has become a very important place for the nation to dialogue on key issues related to the well-being of our people. But today we meet at a very sad moment because we hear of the return of violence as a means of shaping the way we must engage one another on very important issues such as this proposed constitutional amendment. There are four observations that I wanted to highlight that could inform our discussion today. First, I want to highlight that what happened to Professor Madhuku and those from the National Constitutional Assembly, and what we are hearing now about others who are implicated in violence for participating in reflections on the constitutional amendment. We should see this beyond being individual cases where individuals have suffered violence, but as a pattern of violation of the Constitution in most of its sacred aspects. The beatings, the dehumanization, the subjecting of a Zimbabwean to such cruel, inhuman, degrading treatment, which is clearly stated in the Constitution, is a violation of our Constitution. We also need to recognize that such acts that seem to be impeding citizens from having meaningful participation in this important work is also contrary to the Constitution, which requires that citizens participate in reflecting and in meaningful contribution in matters that concerns them. But when we speak about these issues, especially when I speak from the perspective of the church, for me, this is also a moral issue. If you see vanhu vakutora shamu kurova munhu mukuru and hate them, treat them in such a dehumanizing way, in Ndebele they will say inhlamba. This is a disgrace that we can treat a fellow Zimbabwean in such dehumanizing way. And that's why I wanted us to start from this perspective, that apart from us undermining our own laws by violating the rights of individuals, of groups, but we are also desecrating our own decency as a people, as a nation. So I wanted us to start by rejecting this, dissociating ourselves with this, because it's against our law and because it is against our own self-understanding as a people. But secondly, I wanted also us to think about that this issue is also a reflection of what we have not exercised our body politic of. The culture of violence reflects something, the baggage that we have brought from the liberation struggle. Though in the liberation struggle, violence was at some point not avoidable, but over the last 45 years, we have not managed as a society to exercise our politics from physical violence. This remains a big challenge for us, the use of violence and not debate and dialogue as a basis of transacting relationships in political sphere remains a big problem. It has remained embedded in the national DNA, and of course it resurfaces many times during elections. But the fact that it has surfaced now should alert everyone to the fact that something big is happening, because under normal circumstances, one would assume that this process would be allowed to flow without needing any extra constitutional mechanisms to suppress. But if you see that violence is now being deployed as a way to muzzle public participation, it means that this proposed constitutional amendment process is something that is a very, very important. When I looked closely at what happened to Professor Madhuku and his colleagues at the NCA, I was asking myself, what exactly was this violence intending to communicate? But all the other violence that we are hearing about now, I was asking myself, what exactly are they intending to communicate? And I realized that we could identify maybe 5 clear messages. The first one is mere intimidation. The message is to every citizen to say, if you step out of line and question this process, you are going to pay a physical price. So it is meant to silence people through fear. But secondly, it is also meant to desecrate by targeting Professor Madhuku, by targeting others who are in the legal profession, by targeting someone with a high intellectual standing in society. In doing so, this process also humiliates the law itself. If they can beat a lawyer and get away with it, they send a signal that the law he represents has no power. The lower the stature of other human rights defenders and others who are going to be engaged in this process to undermine their efforts to defend their participation. This is a strong message to say, if we can do this to Professor Lovemore Madhuku, we can do this to anyone. And third, of course, this is also meant to discourage organization. The goal is to atomize individuals, to make them afraid to gather, to strategize, and to unite, and therefore to divide the public so that the public remains silent. And this is meant, of course, to make sure that there is only one narrative. That is the narrative of those who say the constitutional amendment must go on without a question. The fourth, I think, a communication message that is being communicated is that, and I think this is one of the most dangerous concern for me, is that it demonstrates impunity. It shows that the state or those acting in the name of the state can do whatever they want without facing any consequences. The message to the ordinary Zimbabweans is that we can do this and there is nothing you can do about it. It mocks the idea of accountability that our constitutional order promises. But finally, I especially in the context of this constitutional amendment process, this use of violence exposes a very tragic irony. It suggests a determination to pass these amendments, but not through a genuine dialogue. You do not need to beat people you are trying to convince to accept the proposals. You dialogue with those who disagree with you. You only beat those whom you wish to silence. And this is what we are seeing now. And that's why we need to take very seriously the significance of the use of violence. But my last contribution in this opening conversation is to say, what can we do about this? What needs to be done to meet the two objectives that Professor Madaza, you proposed in the opening? First, I think we need to encourage citizens not to be cowed, but to continue courageously participating in the dialogues. The very fact that violence was used, it means that we are engaged in a very serious process, and those who are perpetrating this violence would want to impede people from participating. So we need to encourage people not to give up, but to show up, exercise their rights, and demand that the parliament hears them and that the executive hears them. Secondly, there is need for unity of purpose. The strategy of violence is meant to isolate and divide people. So our strength would lie in unity. We need to find a way of galvanizing all actors under one common charter of constitutional integrity, a set of non-negotiable principles that all progressive and pro-democracy forces can rally behind. Political parties, civil society, churches, professional bodies must stand together and say, this is what we all commit together, no matter how different groups are going to engage differently. Third, I think we need to continue with civic education. We must bridge the gap between constitutional talk and people's daily struggles. Many Zimbabweans are worried about putting food on the table. We need to show them that a weak constitution will compromise their economy. When you engage in business that is not protected by laws, your business is not going to thrive. When you don't have your property protected by law, you are going to lose property. We need to enable ordinary people to connect constitutionalism with their own well-being and their own interests. At the moment, we can see that we have not yet been successful in making sure everyone understands that constitutional integrity is a bread and butter issue, and therefore everyone needs to share this concern. Finally, we need, I think, to build alliances. We must broaden engagement with the police, reminding them that they committed an oath to the Constitution, and they committed that they were going to protect the Constitution, but also the citizens. So we need to engage the police. We need to engage the traditional leaders. They are custodians of peace and culture in our communities. We need to engage the churches. We need to engage students, artists, vendors. We need to engage everyone so that they realize that this is not a partisan process. Engaging on the Constitution is not a party political process. It is a commitment to the cohesion of our society and to the integrity of being Zimbabweans. And I think it is at least at this level of engagement where we can end up winning some who will see that their contribution is not to impede the participation of Zimbabweans, but encourage them. These are my initial opening remarks, Professor Madaza, but I'm open to engage as we continue with the conversation. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Kenneth. Thank you. A brilliant and comprehensive and a very appropriate introduction to this discussion. You have covered everything. I have no question to ask except one. How can the church provide the safety in the face of this blatant violence? Is there anything that can be done? I know that the point you made, anyone listening to this would understand the importance of the state taking action to stop this, especially when there's adequate evidence that it's state-condoned type of violence. And as I said earlier on, we have appealed to the police before. You know, it's almost 6 months since the bomb attack at Surface. Still no investigation, except later to say that we are still investigating. When it's very clear from some of us that there's no one who has access to military hardware except the state. A whole bomb, you know? So my question is, how can the church provide comfort and protection to the citizens in this regard?
Yeah.
Beyond.
And I think your observation is correct that the first responsibility to protect lies with the government. The government has the responsibility to protect citizens. And I think that should be our appeal. This responsibility must go back to the government, even if the government is accused of being complicit. We need to consistently communicate this responsibility and give it back to the government. But I think the church also has an important responsibility. You know, one of the most powerful stories we read in the Bible is the story of the Samaritan who found a man who had been brutalized by robbers. We read that some religious people passed through this man, and they passed by because of the urgency of their religious duty. So they were rushing for their religious duty, and they left this man lying on the street. But a Samaritan passed by, and he found this man, and he carried him, and he took care of him, and provided protection for this man. And Jesus asked the question, who of these is the true neighbor? And Jesus, of course, people answered that this looked down Samaritan was the best neighbor. The question today is how does the church create a new sense of neighborliness in the nation, where we can create solidarity and protection of people who may be vulnerable. I think this is an urgent duty for the church to protect, where the churches can become places of refuge of people who are fleeing being abused. But also it will require that church leadership is going to provide shelter using their own bodies, because the protection of the people is going to be guaranteed by the church putting its own body between violence and the people. The church will need to carry the weight of the pain of society by standing between violence and the people. And that's why I think it requires a new ministry in the church, where the church carries this responsibility to protect, but also to heal. Because many people may come to the church to look for protection, and I think the church needs to rediscover this long-standing responsibility to protect, but also to heal. And the church is present in every part of our country, and for this reason, it must become a place of refuge for all those who are fleeing, or for all those who are threatened. But I hope we do not end up reaching a point where the state allows such chaos to take place in a way that so dehumanize its own people in the quest to win the process of changing the constitution. It will be a sad indictment on our government if it allows that violence will become the means through which this process is going to be transacted. So I still believe that there should be some places where reason is supposed to prevail in some sectors of the government. I don't believe that everyone will assume that violence is going to be the way in which this constitutional amendment proposal is going to be processed. You are muted, Professor.
Oh, sorry. Thank you very much. We'll come back to you. Francis, Lovemore Madhuku is trying to get in. I think is as uneducated as me in this technology, so he's trying to get in. That's why I was muted. I was speaking to him on the phone. In the meantime, if Tony can help Madhuku get in, David.
Thank you, Ibbo. Do you want me to continue, or are you going to wait for Madhuku to get in?
You start. Madhuku,
okay.
Come after you.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for this platform, and thank you very much, Reverend Matata, for your outstanding observations, particularly around the role of the church moving forward in this, what I would call an exceptionally dangerous time. Because I think we need to look at very carefully how systematically the guardrails protecting the citizens have been removed over time to allow violence to happen with impunity. And the methodology of the violence sadly remains very similar in Zimbabwe. It is targeted, it is intentional, and it is initiated to cause repression and fear. So the thing of concern for me now is not only the impact of the current violence, but the impact on the population who have been subjected to serial violence over a very long period of time, with very little recourse to justice. And I think one of the critical things to understand is that victims do not forgive and forget. They cannot settle without justice. And unfortunately for Zimbabwe, over the last few years, there's been a systematic removal of the guardrails against violence. the action of the police over the last incident over the weekend with Professor Madhuku, I think needs to be examined quite carefully by the population, because the population need to remind the police that they actually have a duty to protect and not to be bystanders. They actually have a role to protect citizens from violence. I think we need to look very carefully at how systematically the courts have been gutted and are very seldom able to deliver justice for victims of violence and human rights abuses. And the protracted processes that anybody involved or being accused of being an opponent of the state are forced to undergo in the court processes. We have cases going on at the moment that are 2 to 3 years of court appearances and still no resolution on the outcome, even though in many of the cases they are innocent bystanders or were transformed from being complainants to being accused. I think we need to look very carefully at what's happened to the commissions. The failure of the NPRC to fulfill its mandate over a 10-year process, and then the silent removal and then the active removal of the NPRC through this constitutional process, although it was allowed to die actually a few years ago, I think is a sad indictment on our state around its refusal to take ownership of the violence that has happened in this country. I think we need to discuss actively as Zimbabweans what's happened to civil society and the PVO bill and the removal of an active voice of defense for citizens in distress. The PVO bill has effectively allowed much of civil society to become completely inactive and very silent on very, very serious issues. So, and then I think we also need to talk about the regional complicity and allowing the serial ignoring of victims' rights to being represented, having their voices heard, and to upholding their mandate. And I just want to remind people of, in South Africa, there was a Supreme Court judgment compelling the National Prosecuting Authority to investigate the 2007 violence. This is an important statement because, in fact, Professor Madhuku was one of the victims of the 2007 violence and the 2008 violence, and all of those cases were actually compelled to be investigated by the National Prosecuting Authority of South Africa, and those cases have actually just died a quiet death in the region. And I think we also need to examine. There was a very good article today in the Maverick with an interview with Anton Ackerman, one of the Truth and Reconciliation commissioners and then judges, and then he gave an interview on the deeply meaningful role played by Thabo Mbeki on the TRC prosecutions and how it became political settlement and backdoor amnesties. And this has had really serious implications in Zimbabwe as well around how we actually deal with what has happened with victims. And I think we also need to talk actively about the role that the social media and the state takes in trolling and harassing and denigrating victims and the entities representing the victims, right up to the UN level. And the case of Blessed Mhlanga at the moment as being a person who has testified. We've got feedback now, sorry. A person who has testified at UN level now being very nastily threatened, and his family being threatened by entities within Zimbabwe with very little chance of protection. So, Reverend Matata, I'd really like to encourage the church to take up its role of protection, because the safer spaces for voices in Zimbabwe are slowly, or not actually rapidly, being eroded by the state entities, and I think that it is time for a very tough conversation with the church leadership around the duty to protect, because right now the citizens don't have that much safety net to fall back on if they have any problems. So I'd like to actually leave it there, because I see that Professor Madhuku is now online, and I would really like him to talk through what happened to him and the impact. I mean, the very serious impact I hope, Professor Madhuku, you heard, the Supreme Court judgment compelling the NPA to investigate the 2007 violence, and that case has never been completed. So impunity for me is the biggest issue. It has the largest impact because it means that we have a very large section of the population who've never received justice for what has happened to them. And so are very aware of the outcome of even more violence against dissenting voices. So thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you to everybody on this panel.
Before I bring in Professor Madhuku, Francis, just a follow-up question. From where you stand in your organization, what is the incidence of these violence abductions in recent months?
So I think we need to be, what makes me sad is that, the cases that are happening in the urban areas are very publicized and available on social media. But there is a very active increasing presence of agents within the rural areas, really targeting long-time activists, long-time believers in the democratic process, targeting their families. So we're seeing a healthy, between 50 and 100 cases a month of quite nasty nighttime visits, partial abductions. And once again, that nasty beast of sexual abuse is raising its head. And I think we just need to, and it links very well to statements made in the media. And then the incidents start happening. The urban stuff is in the public domain, but I think we need to also look at the national fear. What is happening in the communities? So yes, that is the sad truth, Professor Madaza.
Thanks, Francis. Thanks very much indeed, Professor Madhuku, Tezara. Thanks for joining us, and we regret the problems we had to get the link, but you are there now, Professor Madhuku. Professor Madhuku. Hello, Professor Madhuku. Hello, Tony. Can you speak to him on the phone there? Hello.
I'll keep trying.
Professor Madhuku, can you hear us? Professor Madhuku, I think he's having problems with the network. Professor Madhuku. Professor Madhuku. I think, Brian, we may have to bring you now while the technicians help Madhuku get in. Brian, sorry to stampede on you.
Okay.
Brian Reptopoulos.
Thank you.
Speaking from
Thank you,
Cape Town.
Ibbo, and thank you to SAPES Trust for allowing me to join this conversation, and welcome to all the listeners. And thanks to the previous speakers, and I'd like to join them in condemning the violence that has been inflicted on SAPES, on NCA, and on recently on Tendai Biti and others in the rural areas. I think this is, as Francis has pointed out, this is a long-term trend. What we're seeing now is just a kind of resurgent authoritarianism on an even deeper level than we saw under the Mugabe government. And the question that we have to ask is, and some have been asking, is why? Why is this happening now in the way that it does? And I want to say that the violence that has been inflicted on citizens is not just the coercious violence of the state, but the structural violence of the changes in the political economy of Zimbabwe, which helps to explain both why the state is acting in the way that it does and the responses from the citizenry. First of all, as with other post-colonial states, where the private sector is weak, where attempts at accumulation through the private market is weak, the state becomes a center of accumulation. It's not what's happening in Zimbabwe is not exceptional. It's part of a longer-term trend of post-colonial states. And using that state accumulation, corruption then becomes the mode of accumulation through non-market accumulation, not through proper fiscal procedures, but through control of especially resources, natural resources, as we've seen, particularly in this area of critical minerals. And therefore, losing control of that state and that accumulation process is central to what defines these ruling elites. So the use of violence increasingly becomes a major means of staying in power, but also the use of corruption to build alliances amongst elites, but also even within the opposition forces, sadly, that we've seen that this corruption has been used to build broader forms of acceptability. And for many in the citizenry, corruption doesn't mean the same thing for everybody. Sometimes it's a means of survival. And it's a means of survival when, as in Zimbabwe, which is now the third largest informal sector in the world, everybody in the informal sector is in survival mode now. And therefore anything can be done to make people survive as much as they could. And corruption, as we've seen, the cartelization of our resources by the ruling elite, but it also creates factionalism, where those who feel left out of the alliances of corruption begin to respond. And we've seen that in the ruling party. So we need to understand this violence, not just the coercive state violence that we've seen now, but the structural violence of the changes in the political economy of Zimbabwe, which makes the state accumulation process central to why the ruling elite is carrying out what it does now, and in doing so in the manner that it does so now. And I think that's a very, very important issue to keep in mind. So at a different level, at a regional level, as we've already discussed, SADC has very weak institutions. We've seen in the past the solidarity, liberation solidarity, which takes precedence over most other issues around democratic questions. And therefore, we are unlikely to see any movement from SADC on this issue at this moment, unless a particular leading country in SADC takes the process forward. And given that Zimbabwe is not the only crisis in the region, as we've seen, in Mozambique, in Tanzania, that this form of state violence is not new and it's not exceptional. It's part of a broader problem in the region, within a regional body that is unlikely to move. And then, of course, we have the international context, where we've seen the complete breakdown of international law. And I've said in the past, and other scholars have said, international law has never really been universal, as Perry Anderson has noted. It's always been selective and usually in the form of empire. So what Trump is doing now is not new. It's just taken to a different level. And certainly not new to US imperialist politics. This has been going on for decades. The attack on Venezuela, Iran now, and the threats against Cuba. So in this context of the demise of international law, authoritarian leaders like Mnangagwa feel less traction of international pressure, because they turn around and say to people like, if there's countries in the West who are criticizing him, who have been complicit in the genocide in Gaza, who are you to talk to us about democracy? And so they feel a greater traction to do what they're doing and get away with it. And unfortunately, at this current level, at both regional and international level, Zimbabwe, the violence that is going on here is not going to get the pressure that we think we can get from the region and international level. So in order to understand what's going on, we need to understand it at these different levels: national, changes in the political economy, the centrality of the state in accumulation process, corruption, the way corruption breeds certain kinds of alliances, but also factionalism, the weakness of SADC, the crisis of democracy in SADC, and the breakdown of international law. And the fact that the US now is the biggest perpetrator of international breakdown and complicit in a major genocide in Gaza, and now what's going on in Iran is threatening to build a regional battle which will have global implications for the citizenry. And where Zimbabwe violence now has to take all that into account. I would say going forward, one of the things that needs to be done is both the opposition and the civil society movement needs to have a critical reflection on both their successes and their challenges from the past. We've seen within the opposition problems of accountability and democracy, problems of succession, violence against women. We've seen subservience of certain factions to the ruling party through the Pollard process and buying off of opposition players through corruption, and subservience to a ruling party because this seems the only form of employment. That in opposition politics increasingly becomes about employment and about finding ways to survive. So that these reflections and also the subservience of civil society groups to political parties and turning civil society groups into political parties. These have been major strategic errors that have not been the major cause. The major cause, of course, is the state infiltration, state violence, but also the strategic mistakes of both the opposition and civil society over the decades, which we need to reflect on if we're going to move forward. And Ibbo, you talked about the 90s. The difference between the 1990s was then you had a different social structure. You had a much stronger labor movement, which had structures throughout the country. You had a relatively independent middle class, which didn't only rely on the state, a strong critical intelligentsia, which were able to build structures. And there was a time where that movement took the lead in building the narrative around constitutionalism and took the lead in getting that the constitutional referendum won and in moving the process forward and leading to the first defeat of the ruling party. The problem now, as I've said, is those structures are no longer there. The informalization of the economy means the labor movement has been decimated. What's left of the middle class is often has to survive through some form of linkage to a corrupt state. What we've seen with the breakdown and the loss of funding to NGOs through the Trump administration means that CSOs now are in survival mode, and many of them are just looking for ways even to try and work with the state to survive. So that civil society is at its weakest in the post-colonial period and in a real state of crisis within this broader global context. So let me just stop there. Those are my initial thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, don't stop there. Let me get back to thanks for this outline, the political economy approach, and also the academic outline that you have given, especially regarding the international, the global situation, which no doubt the Zimbabwean state is taking advantage of, that the international community is busy elsewhere. And I know you're out there in Cape Town, but you know that here, there's been deafening silence on the part of the diplomatic corps in Zimbabwe. It's I know I got a call from one or two ambassadors who were after the bomb attack in October, namely the British and a few others, but we have not seen a public statement yet. The church responds almost immediately to this acts of violence, including the attack on sappers. But no, I haven't seen, unless I've not been attentive enough. I've not seen a statement from the diplomatic corps at all, following what has happened to Lovemore Madhuku on Sunday.
No.
In the old days, you used to get those statements.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised at all about the silence in SADC, But what can be done? In particular,
I think, yeah, I
we,
think
what can be
you're right
done?
about the
Yeah.
silence, and the silence is because for the EU, the Zimbabwe question is not the major problem. For them, it's about Ukraine, and so they're looking for ways to have some kind of transactional relationship with the ruling party in Zimbabwe. And so that's the mode that they're taking. They also feel that the opposition is in such a weak, dysfunctional state that they no longer present an alternative. That's the way I read their current response. So we can expect at this time almost nothing from the EU because also they've gone into a transactional mode. As I said, and globally, because the critical minerals issue now is a central issue in the geopolitical battle with China. And therefore, you'll see different governments, even though the African Union has the AfCFTA, the African Free Trade Agreement, you still find individual governments engaging in individual transactional relationships with the US or with the EU, rather than going into it as a continent, where we'd have much more traction negotiating as a continent. And we're not doing that. So in that context, you can expect very little criticism from Western diplomats.
Yeah, but what about the diaspora? You know, one of the features which explains the plight of civil society in Zimbabwe is the fact that we have up to 75% of professionals like yourself outside the country. And I dare say half the population is out of the country now. We're South Africa alone now must be about 5-6 million Zimbabweans.
Yeah.
And if you add the UK and all other parts of the world, including the moon, where there are Zimbabweans, we have a situation where the public response is sadly depleted.
Yeah.
To the point where we can no longer ignore the role of the diaspora.
Yeah.
And that's why we always engage in the diaspora. So what can the diaspora do beyond what they are doing already, which is really they're very attentive to the home situation, not to mention the remittances, which are almost 3 billion a year, 2.5 billion in the remittances, which have cushioned a poverty-stricken population. What can be done with respect to this particular issue now?
First of all, the diaspora is not homogeneous. That you must remember. It's very differentiated. The second thing is that sorry, I seem to be echoing. Is that many in the diaspora are also facing pressures as being foreigners, as being outsiders. So for many, there's also a survival strategy because of the xenophobia, which takes place, and the fact that the global rights, part of the discourse of the global right, is that one of the major problems of the West is immigration. That's been central to the rise of the global right. So the diaspora are having to deal with that major issue in their various areas and having to be very careful the way they respond, because that xenophobia, that anti-immigration message has a broad resonance within those countries. And so they're having to deal with those kind of issues. And when they respond to Zimbabwe, that's the kind of context in which they're having to respond.
No, thanks, Brian. I'll come back to you. Let me get Professor Madhuku at last. Welcome, Professor Madhuku.
Thank you. Welcome. I'm sorry for the delay in joining the session.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but you'll be able to see it on YouTube later. But you had some very, very interesting discussions so far, where the introduction by Reverend Mutata was very good in terms of outlining the problem, and the situation that we're in, albeit using your recent experience, your recent ordeal, as an illustration. And our main objectives for this meeting, first and foremost, is to stop the violence and how to stop it, and to appeal to the authorities who are so implicated, as your deal illustrates, as diabetes ordeal today illustrates, as the bomb attack on Cyprus illustrates, the police are almost complicit in these matters. So how do we appeal to them to stop this, to the state? It's some of the things we're trying to discuss today. And we, with Reverend Mutata, we agreed that the role of the church is so central, especially in the Zimbabwean circumstance, and that the church should provide protection to a besieged population. And secondly was to plead that the people of Zimbabwe must be allowed to exercise their constitutional rights, right of association, freedom of speech, and we have a contrast to previous constitutional processes, going back to the Constitutional Commission of 2000, where Jonathan and I were on that executive committee, and the extent to which you had 400 members, commissioners, and all MPs were party to it, an outreach of 6 months in which people discussed, debated, and there was, of course, a referendum. And the contrast now, and I quoted from the document, from the project document of BBI, Jonathan Moyo's document, where it says very clearly, one of the strategies to be used includes countering, drowning, crowding out, and disrupting negative narratives. It's there in the document as an objective of getting this through. So I'm just thought I'd give you that as a way of a background. And of course, we had Frances Lovemore, medical doctor herself, of a unit, and she's just pointing out that the abuse of the population in the rural areas is increasing, and likely to increase as the weeks go by, regimentation included. And then Brian Reftopoulos has given us, I think you heard most of what he said, he gave us an academic context. So it's you now. We wanted you first, but I think it's okay now. First and foremost is to ask, how are you?
I'm now fine. Thank you very much for asking. I'm now fine. We are recovering. You just still have, pain here and there, but the doctors cleared us and said this time there are no internal injuries. It's just the what they call the attacks right across the body and so forth. So it's not internally. They cleared us for now. That's what they say.
Now, some of us heard and saw your press conference the other day, which was brilliant to say the least. Perhaps you could begin. You could begin right there. The position you took vis-a-vis this amendment, the position you took vis-a-vis the process ahead, the view you took that this is a long struggle and we have no reason to give up. Up to you, Professor Madhuku.
Thank you. I will start with that, indicating the position that we took, that is referring to the NCA and myself, the position we took, and then I will explain what happened on Sunday. But just to say on the position we took has clearly been an unavoidable one on the basis that we have seen and we know that the government of Zimbabwe simply wants one thing now, which is to consolidate power and undermine every form of democratic framework, every form of democratic participation, and the arrogance that is accompanying it, which is basically that the elite that is now in control of ZANU-PF will decide for the rest of the country what has to be done, what will go into the constitution, what changes they will make. But all those changes that they are determined to make are changes that are meant to preserve their control of the state and to ensure that they remain in power uninterrupted. So we took a definite position that that would not be acceptable. It is something that has been at the center of the problems that we have, and that as Zimbabweans we have to oppose it. That position came from the fact that the movers of these processes simply say that they do not want to hear what the people want. They do not want to take into account what the people think. They only want to take into account what they think and what they want. I think that they have made that clear. This is so because they have said right at the outset that they are going to follow a path which will not lead to a referendum. Secondly, they are also going to follow a path which would just simply have a one-sided discussion. As you can see, every other form of discussion around this proposal, which is not in favor of what the proposal stands for, would not be allowed. It would certainly be disrupted and enforce the violence that has accompanied that. So we took that position. We were aware that it would be a very difficult one and that the authorities would stand out there and want to crush it. Having said that, we are aware that the position we took is a position that is shared by a number of other organizations. It is also a position that is shared by the majority of the people of Zimbabwe. So it is for us a responsibility which we have as Zimbabweans to simply pursue a path which we know is in the interest of the country, which we also know is in the interest of the majority, but we also happen to know that it will be a direct threat to those that want to pursue that path which is against the people. I might then need to say that what we were doing on Sunday, we were totally not prepared for what happened because what we thought would, at this stage, this is now 2026, that the authorities would allow persons in our position, in our own offices, at our own premises, which is actually close to the public. It's a full rounded up, it's durable with a small gate which you open. And then, but we were coming in with all those of our members who are in our committees across to have a very serious discussion on how we would oppose this and the strategies we would adopt. And that was all that we wanted to do and had designed to do. And as is now common knowledge, the police, who obviously from their systems, because they will happen to know what's happened, they've planted people all over the place. They would know the activities at our offices. They disrupted the meeting 2 days earlier. They simply came and parked their vehicles at the outside our gate. That 2 vehicles from the police. They had both uniformed and ununiformed police officers, not those who were not in uniform. And then there were several other people who would come and just interact with them. But the last we know is the 2 vehicles that came with unmarked numbers, those without number plates, who then came just when we were about to start. They had been parked out for, close to, over an hour. And we thought, well, they are just monitoring what's going on and possibly would give protection should there be any problems. Then they came, the ones who were in plainclothes police officers, just came to the gate and demanded to enter and introduce themselves as police officers who were coming in because the meeting was not lawful and so on. When some of our members tried to argue with them, I went to the gate to say to our members, do not argue with the police. And then I tried to reason with them. That's immediately shot in the air, as we have already reported. And then everyone got scattered. They started beating me up just like that, unprovoked, no warning, no nothing. And then so they would take turns to run after all these other members in within the premises. I think we're just now about 300 people that were going to then be, they were in the tent, we had put a tent inside there, and people were sitting in the tent and all over. It caused so much panic. People were running all over the place. So they would go after people, beat them up, come back to me because I had then sat down. I thought, as in the past, once they do that, you would say you're under arrest. And as I thought that would be the easiest way of breaking the panic, and they would take me perhaps to to the police station and so on. But that didn't stop them. So all on. So it took 10 to 15 minutes of that chaos. Then just suddenly they took our phones and everything else and went out. And then these police vehicles were still there. Then some of these people got into police vehicles. Others got into these unmarked vehicles. And then the 4 vehicles drove away together. What I am saying now is quite clear that there is no need to debate who did it. It's very clear. We saw, we know it was the police officers who were involved and who did what all the beating was by police officers. The persons that came to the door introduced themselves as police officers so that they gain entry. That's what they said. But they then forced their way by opening the gate wide. So there's no question of saying who did it. I also indicated previously, perhaps at the press conference, that we then got some statements from the police. The one that was then made to be the final statement was they produced an earlier one which they claimed was fake, which had said they would investigate. They would also investigate those police officers who assisted these and the criminals that wanted to kill NCA leaders, something like that. That there was a statement. Perhaps that was fake. But the final one then claimed that we had written to them, notifying them that they had written back to us, indicating that our notifications were not regular, and then they wanted to get in touch with our convener. That was false because that never happened, and it has never happened before. When we have meetings at our head office of our structures, we do not notify the police. We have never notified the police before, even in previous meetings that they have broken. I think this was long past for us. That was it's a long time ago that they had done what they did this time around. But we were not surprised because it was coming after the various media interviews I had done or statements we had made. I think starting with the BBC interview, then several interviews, then also interviews where we spoke out very clearly about this. So we were not surprised that they were then monitoring us and wanting to stop whatever we wanted to do. But the extent of the brutality was something that we thought would not belong to this era, 2026. As I think Dr. Lovemore had indicated, I was one of the victims of the 2007 brutality, which is well known. That one was different in the sense that we were outside our various premises. We had gone to Highfield as part of a Save Zimbabwe protest, and then it was in the course of that we were then arrested, and after our arrest, we were beaten up in police custody. Even when Morgan Tsvangirai came to want to check after us, because he then came to the police station, Machipisa, then he was brought in and also beaten. I'm sure they couldn't make arguments because our beatings were within the police station, which involved us. It involved people like Sekai Holland and Grace Quinche, so many other people that were involved and thoroughly beaten and brutalized on that day, including even BT, Chamisa, and so on. They were part of the group that was at Machipisa. So the difference here was just that they came to the offices to break a meeting which ordinarily would have been within the framework of the law. In 2007, we were within our constitutional rights to do so, to have the protests. They clearly said that was not lawful, but we had made it clear that we're not going to take that into account because they never permitted protests, never permitted lawful meetings, which is what they are also doing now. They are never going to permit our meetings. They are so arrogant as to watch a massive series of ZANU-PF meetings around the country on the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment number 3 bill. but not a single meeting of those opposed to it is being allowed. That is an extreme level of arrogance, but also a display of brutality, abuse of power, and everything that goes with it. This is the position. I think what I've done there is to say what happened, at the same time to indicate what the issues are. I've listened to the other presentations. What I think I might need to add before I'm engaged by the convener is that this government has not learned anything from what has happened before. It actually believes that it can only succeed via violence against its opponents. And whereas all of us see this as something that is unbelievable, it is actually their modus operandi. They actually believe that if they do away with violence, they will lose power. So they now clearly keep power on the basis of violence. And it is on that basis that, as we think of the way forward, we must confront that the thought process, the political process, which is presided over by ZANU-PF, is anchored by violence. They don't understand anything else. It must just be violence. They are aware of the clear position that Zimbabweans would not allow them if they are given a free environment to express themselves. With the constitutional process, there is no room for partisan framework. There is no room for small groups. There must be one room which is for everyone to be on board, and that people to be able to coordinate their activities. And once we do that, we would then be serving the interests of the people, because most of our people would want their voices to be expressed through the various groups who are able to do so. And I think society has been thoroughly intimidated by what is going on, but they are in support. In fact, I would say that more than 90% of the people of this country support the position that we should block or stop Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment number 3. I would say that is over 90% rejection rate of that bill. No one would accept it. This is so because the one achievement that came from the Constitution of 2013, we were opposed to it because we didn't believe it was democratic enough and the process not been democratic enough. But we were clear that there were gains that were contained in that document, just like there were gains that were contained in the 2000 document. And one of the most important gains in the 2013 document, which was also in the 2000 document, was the issue of term limit for the president. 10 years maximum number of years that anyone would be in office. Now, that would have been one of the things that many people who voted in 2013 were voting for, given the 37 years we had been under President Mugabe. Then at that time, it was 33 years. So it was one of the rallying cries and so on. Then there were, of course, issues to do with but the term limit was one of the driving forces for the yes vote in that constitution. Now, that is the very root that they want to tamper with. You also know that in 2013, for the first time, the constitution abolished this idea that the president would appoint some people to be in parliament. President Mugabe, directly or indirectly, obviously up to about 30 people that were being appointed in the Senate and in the then National Assembly. And the 2013 Constitution did clearly abolish that. Those we were recognizing them as clear advantages. These things are now just in the stroke of a pen, wanted to be taken away. But more fundamentally, with or without the 2013 Constitution, we had a clear position that the president of the country would be directly elected by the people. And this is what happened, the amendment that took place in 1987, and then starting from 1990, we have been electing a president directly. Now one would think that you cannot simply change that and say that the president would be elected by parliament. You also say that the person who will be elected by parliament need not be an MP. In other words, even as people will be voting for MPs, they would not have an idea of who may become president. Then, just after you have elected MPs, you then pass money around. You tell people who to vote for, or you can threaten the MPs, depending on what will be then most convenient. So it can be both money and threats. Then the public will just be waiting to know who is going to be. Like the way the Roman Catholic Church elects the Pope. But at least we know that the Pope is coming out of a group of persons. It might be one of those. In our proposed amendment, we would not know because the person need not be an MP. So I want to be clear to people that it's not even an indirect election because there are people who are saying that we are moving from a direct to an indirect election. That is not correct. With an indirect election, you would have an idea of who is going to be prime minister because that person would also be participating in an election and they will be elected by someone. And so on, they would have a constituency there, etc. In this case, you'll just be surprised. Which is why when I saw some cartoons of who may become president under the new system, I mean, that is a very correct characterization. Those artists that we will wake up to be told who our president is. Surely that is a very serious change to the constitution, which they are proposing. And there's no reason for that proposal. Uh, and so on. You need to now stop me if you have to. But I wanted to address that the justifications given for both the so-called lengthening of a term and also the issue that we have in India is that there is toxicity, whatever, that an election is it's not good to have elections every 5 years. And that's so on. Everything they are saying is that they don't want democracy. They find democracy quite a painful exercise. Well, that is the justification given in every respect. Is uh, and I don't know why those people are not ashamed of the justifications that they're giving, because the justifications they are giving and they say these things ought to happen. The very reason for an electoral democracy, the very reason for a constitutional democracy is that you have these periodical, accountable electoral processes. Instead of making it up more than 5 years, it should be, you can reduce it to 4 years, which is what other democracies are doing. Then you get that. So, for the sake of getting what they want about the 2030 project, they just have to do a wholesome change to the constitution, which is not thought out. No one has yet factored in what happens if the president is unable to reach 2028 or is unable to reach 2029 and so on. It's not even factored in. And then what happens with, because the different political parties may take power. ZANU-PF thinks that only ZANU-PF will remain in office for a long time to come. So I believe from what Dr. Mtata said, Reverend Mtata, Dr. Mtata, the church ought to play a critical role. The convener has posed the question of, so what do we do to stop the violence? I think that this first thing is to make it clear that Zimbabweans must keep doing what they are doing in opposing this without taking into account the violence. That is the best way. And then we campaign for those that could rescue us, to rescue us from the violence. The violence can only end if we continue ourselves to do what we are doing, and these ones continue with their violence while we continue with resisting them. And then there will be an intervention, I think, very soon.
Yeah, before I turn to Reverend Tata for him to repeat his 5 recommendations, which he outlined at the beginning, I would like him to repeat those in the form of resolutions from this conversation. But to ask you yourself, Lovemore, what is the possible trajectory between now and the end of the 90 days? And what are what chances are there for your constitutional challenge, which you are leading on behalf of war veterans? I've lost you there. I'll come back to you. You heard me?
I didn't hear you. If you you can
I
repeat.
was saying that basically I'm going to move to Reverend Motata, but before I do that, I would like you to indicate what the likely trajectory of this process for the next 70 days or so, and what are the chances of the the challenge which you are leading in the Constitutional Court on behalf of the war veterans. How do you see that panning out? You missed me there again? Okay, I'll come back to you later. Let me go to Reverend Mutata. Reverend Mutata, if you can please, for the sake of the audience, we have about 300 on this platform right now, people. A parallel process Rumbi is now 530. So we have 700 people right now listening. By tomorrow morning to be easily 10,000. So I'd like you to repeat your the recommendations, which were, as I said to you, brilliant and comprehensive as the way forward, especially the issue of the alliance, which would dovetail with what Madhuku has just said about how we can resist this violence and keep on course in fighting the amendment. Reverend Tata.
Yes. First, I want to share my deep, sincere regret for what happened to you, Professor Madhuku. It's really sad, but also such a disgrace to see someone who is held in such high honor in our society being treated the way you were treated. I mean, this is not that no one deserves this kind of treatment, but to see someone who is held in high esteem in our society, one who gives deep insights into the way we can understand the Constitution, being treated in such barbaric way was really shocking. My thoughts, Professor Madaza, was after looking at the systemic nature of violence in our society, which I think both Professor Raptopoulos and Dr. Lovemore have also demonstrated, both from a social economic analysis, but also from a psychological trauma perspectives. I wanted us to say, what do we do in this situation? And I proposed 5 actions. The first is that we need to continue, as Professor Madhuku said, we need to continue. We should not be cowed. The very fact that violence is being used on those who are trying to organize, to reflect, and offer alternative interpretation shows that these changes are fundamental. It means that the changes are so important that some people are protecting, that citizens are not aware of the implications of the changes, and that's why there is violence is now being used. So people should not give up in the face of this brutalization. They should continue. The second, I think, is that we need to find a unit of purpose, because it's very easy. Violence works well where individuals get isolated and get divided. But strength lies in unity, and that's why I would appeal to many people who have already provided different infrastructure for dialogue, for engagement, that maybe together there may be need to establish some kind of a common charter for constitutional integrity that sets the principles in which every progressive force and pro-democracy groups are going to rally behind. Yes, it's important that different actors may lead based on their constituencies, but I think without a nationally coherent process, we may end up seeing individuals being singled out and then the rest of the people getting intimidated. So I think we need to bring everyone on board, civil society actors, churches, professional bodies. They must all stand behind a common agenda, and even if their approaches may differ depending on where they are located. The third issue, I think, is that there is need for continued civic education, because we need to build the bridge between constitutional talk and people's daily struggles. Because for some, the talk about the constitution is sometimes located within the sphere of political action and reflection. Some people may not see how the change of the constitution may have a bearing on their bread and butter issues, because it is not a natural connection for many people. They may be hearing that there is this proposal to change the constitution, but they don't know that it will affect their property rights. How it will threaten their property rights, how it will threaten their freedoms, how it will threaten how they exercise their economic rights, how there are many implications of such a change of the constitution. Many people may not realize that it's not only for some idealistic people like Professor Madhuku who are protecting the constitution. The constitution has to do with the dignity of all people, and that all people need to own this. And they can only do so through a very serious civic education program. But finally, I want to highlight also that there will be need to build alliances also, even with those who are normally not part of the progressive movement. There are people in the police force who may need to be persuaded to understand that their responsibility in this moment is to protect, and therefore they can play a role within the difficulties of their institutional frameworks, but they can be persuaded to participate to protect the people. It's the same with the traditional leaders. It's the same with those who are in the different security sectors. The same with the churches. There is need to build alliances across different sectors of society. And some of the conversations will need to be approached in non-traditional channels, so that everyone understands the implications of these changes, and bring everyone on board. Professor Madhuku, I fully agree with you. I'm not a lawyer, but when I read the proposed changes to the Constitution, they are scary. This is a wholesale change to how society will participate meaningfully going forward. If the changes go through, spaces for participation will be rendered almost meaningless, and I think the consolidation of power will be almost be permanent. So I fully agree. Personally, I believe, and I concur with the statement I have seen from the churches. Their reading of the times is very accurate. We are entering a very difficult moment, but it will require that we are united and remain focused in even in the face of so much pain that may come. As Professor Raftopoulos has pointed out, currently the world is busy with other things. They may not be interested in small countries like Zimbabwe, but I think we should be there for ourselves. We need to be in solidarity with one another ourselves. And remember that when we became free as a nation, we were cooking sadza and slaughtering small chickens. This is how the struggle was won. And it is when everyone start to realize that small contributions can make a big difference that maybe we can start to see some changes.
Oh, thanks very much indeed. Thank you. This is very, very inspiring. Thank you. Francis, your last word? Francis, Lovemore? I'll be coming to Professor Madhuku last.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much to everybody, particularly to Professor Madhuku. Yeah, your stalwart stance in this is truly to be admired. I mean, I have been dealing with this for a very long time, and what I keep reminding people is that the victims continue to be victims, and I think we need to recognize this. The language that is used in this country is one of cruelty and repression, and it needs to be called out for that. Dr. Matata, I would just like to thank you for inspiring people to realize that we can all make a small difference, and lots of small differences can assist in actually enlightening our own understanding of what is happening. And to Brian, thank you for your analysis. We're all seized with the geopolitics of what is happening and exactly where we fit in the scale of what's happening in the world. Professor Madaza, thank you very much for the platform. I think that this is probably the only place where we can dialogue, and it's the only place where we can actually start to hear each other. So I encourage you to carry on doing this good work. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. You're part of it. You've always been part of this. So don't talk as someone from outside. So thank you. Brian, your last words on the way forward?
Thanks, Ibbo. First of all, thanks to all the speakers, and just once again to express solidarity with Lovemore and his colleagues for the brutality that they faced once again over a long period of time. I also want to thank the speakers for emphasizing the importance of a unified movement. More than ever, we need to bring together the groups that are currently pressing to stop this amendment, bring them into one voice, ensure they're not subordinate to any political party, but are part of a broader social movement, even if political parties are involved, and that we get a message that, as Reverend Tata says, speaks to not just the legal constitutionality issues, but to the lived experiences, the livelihood experiences of people at an everyday level, where they're able to connect those everyday problems with a broader constitutional question. And we're able to build a narrative that can once again take that narrative away from ZANU-PF, as we did in the 1990s. We led that narrative around constitutionalism and democracy, and they were behind. What they did with the land reform program was to kind of draw a bifurcation between the rights question and the redistributive question. The redistributive question became part of the colonial liberation legacy. The rights question was something that was a regime change, something from outside, completely historically incorrect. The rights question was central to anti-colonial struggles, central to the liberation movement, but the way that they constructed the narrative, they drew that division between rights and redistribution, economic questions and human rights issues. We have got to make that connection. We have got to build a narrative which makes that connection, as Reverend Mtata has said. And I think that when we build this unity movement, we need to keep that in mind. Thank you, Ibbo, for the opportunity. I wish you well.
Thanks, Brian. Nice to see you again. And remember, you want your home soon. Professor Madhuku, yeah.
Yes.
I asked you a question earlier on. Was the first? Maybe you could answer that question first. I've asked, what is the possible trajectory in the days ahead, especially with regard to the court challenge that you are leading on behalf of war veterans, and then after that is really to reflect on what Reverend Mutata has said, with respect to the way forward, especially the issue of unity. You know very well that some of us are involved in mediation between the DCP, Defend the Constitution platform, led by Timba as convener, and CDF, led by Tendai Biti. And we've been trying to see whether we can get everyone on board, including NCA, and maybe have even five conveners. You don't have to have one convener, have as many conveners as necessary. Tony, Rila, and I are co-conveners of the PCC. It works. So, my first question first, sir.
Thank you. I will answer the first question and deal with it, but I want to thank very much Dr. Francis Lovemore, Professor Raftopoulos. Thank you very much for his very refreshing analysis. And then, of course, Dr. Mtata. I don't want to forget that, so I had to start from there. It was a very useful platform. I would say to you, even before I answer your question, that your platform, today's platform, could actually be the breaking point where you now have a way forward. They have been very useful ideas, as I'll now comment on what Reverend Dr. Mtata has said. I think you might take seriously what has been discussed today, and we could move forward from there. So I now go to the trajectory going forward. I think that it's very important that if we pick from I saw 4 things coming out from Dr. Mtata. I want to get to those, and then I'll answer your question, which was direct about the legal challenges. I saw 4 things. First, of course, that we must continue. Whatever everyone is doing at the moment, which is attracting violence, must be continued. So that means that whatever the various groups, even as there's mediation, even as we are trying to ensure that we have one voice, whatever it is that is attracting ZANU-PF to have violence or to warn, please let that continue. That is step number 1. We don't stop here, we continue. So you continue with your platforms, what it is that would make SAPES a target, continue with that. What is it that would make DCP a target? Continue with it. That is what I got from there, and I in full agreement. 1, we continue where we are. So there are meetings as we speak. The NCA office is open. When I had a meeting with one of those ambassadors, when this thing started, it was at the NCA office, wide open, even with that big cross, whatever it is, and so on, and even with that warning that says, Lovemore Madhuku, they are all there at the gate. We get in and out, and we've said we're not taking those things off. We'll close our gates, open it as such. So that is number 1. Number 2, he has spoken, and I agree a million times, that we should now talk about coordination and unity. And for my response to that, we simply need a convener. The churches can convene us. I think it's not so much about whether we have 2 or 3. We are prepared to work with everyone else under any platform. So don't have any problems with the NCA. The NCA would join anything. I'm only surprised that if there are 2 or 3, you should expand the thing. If your mediation should not just be focusing on Timba and BT, I think there are many other groups out there that would need to be. So the easiest thing would be what the churches have done. They've issued a statement. They appear to be quite committed. They can bring us together, civic, political parties, and everyone. This is what was the magic in the late 90s. Some platform where everyone is comfortable to be there. And I understand from what I've been told that I think everyone is there. Everyone seems to think that we can be under one roof, and if we are convinced. That was his number 2, and I agree with it. Number 3 was that we should have civic education, which is a massive. We must continue to educate people on these things. Let's make sure that we link the Constitution with their daily struggles. This would mean, again, flyers. This would mean, again, small meetings. This would mean, distribution of materials. That was the 3rd point. Then the 4th thing that he mentioned, which I also agree with, is that we should still reach out to the institutions of state and others that are there to protect people. The police must still be told that they have a duty and to protect people. The traditional leaders and all these other institutions, state institutions, must not be captured by ZANU-PF. We must not allow ZANU-PF to capture the police. we,
We can hear you. Carry on. We can hear you.
I'm sorry, I think I got
No, we are back.
cut off. Yeah, I'm back. Yes, I was saying that at number 4. I hope Professor Madaza, you will have to summarize these 4 as 4. There will be 5 with when I add the 5th one in your
Okay.
way you distribute and so on. But at the 4th stage, he has spoken very well. And let's say this is our attack on capturing. We say that ZANU-PF must not be allowed to capture institutions that must remain for the people and for the state. So the police, the army, the traditional leaders, the judiciary, and so on. We must have a message that continues to say, look, you must not be captured. We know that ZANU-PF wants to capture you and it will continue, but please don't be captured. So even as at number 3, we are talking about civic education, which is to take us to the ordinary people and link them to the struggle that we have. At number 4, we are engaging institutions of the state that must exist for us. Why would you have police officers parked outside and being brutalized and the NCA members being, and then you drive away with the assailants and so forth, and then you issue false statements, etc. We must not give up on institutions. They must not be captured by ZANU-PF. So we must have a program around one. The 5th one I want to add, Professor Madaza, which I know that Dr. Mtata will agree with it. We must force our neighbors and SADC to be involved in this struggle, whether they like it or not. We just drag them in. One way in which we do that, it's not just, we must camp in some of their countries. In the past, we used to have meetings across. If we find that we are under risk here, we can have a meeting. All of us in South Africa, and we have the resources to get there. And then we force the South African government to be hosting us by force. So we have a meeting in South Africa or a meeting in Zambia, where and so on, where we are not arrested. But South Africa must be the target. Not we don't want to overload it with what not. We just simply want the space. Where we are denied the space here, we can just go there, have a day, all of us issue all our statements and from there outline our programs from there when we know there's no police officers going to beat us up and drive back to our country and so forth. Now that way we involve the SADC countries. I'm saying that is the 5th position I'm adding is a
It's very good.
program that forces SADC, whether it likes it or not to persuade them. They must find us on their soil talking about Zimbabwe, planning about Zimbabwe. That is what happened with the liberation struggle. Mozambique, Zambia, Tanzania, they were forced because they simply found people in their territories. Whether those governments in now would say we welcome you like we were welcomed in Zambia, Mozambique, Tanzania, and so on by the Nyereres, the Kaundas, the Machels, and so forth, when they found Zimbabweans there, but dealing with it. I think that's what will happen. If you find us sitting in some space in South Africa, whether it's an open space or so, we have so many Zimbabweans there. And we are talking Zimbabwe. We are criticizing amendment number in a free place where there is no framework. Although we are courageous now, we don't want to be beaten every day, but we are not going to give up. So there are times when we want to do things in peace. There are times like now I'll be at my NCA office almost all these days, continue with the small meetings there. But there are times when I want the whole world to see that I am with others. I am with Professor Madaza, not online like, but physically together. But we might choose a space somewhere. So if we choose Mozambique or Zambia, we'll be there and say someone will organize that we meet and so on. That is my 5th edition. The 5th point I'm adding is you will have to formulate it yourself. You will know better. But it is to drag SADC. That's how I'll put it. Dragging
Yeah.
SADC into this issue, whether it likes it or not. They must. Why do you exist as a community which is founded on the rule of law, which is founded on democracy, which is founded on constitutionalism? But you watch Zimbabwe. Where is this nonsense? Where someone says, "I don't want to leave office. I want to add more time," but you are doing that in an environment where in South Africa people are living. So you have Mbeki is out, President Zuma is out, President Ramaphosa will be out soon, and so on. But you can say, I'm not leaving, but I would have a meeting with President Ramaphosa and we are still colleagues. No, no, no. It can happen in the same country, and so in the same region. So we must drag SADC because our point is clear. You can't say we're not going to have elections in, you know, that in 2028. Everyone, a councillor says you will stay there for another 2 years. An MP says I'll be there for another 2 years. Which other country does that madness? No one. So if we force ourselves into those countries, I think in our African culture, you can force your neighbor. You just run to a neighbor. If you start beating your wife, she will cry and go to a neighbor, and you'll have and the neighbor will bring your wife back. I mean, we have seen this happening. Etc. And say, I saw your family. That's how we say it in the place where I come from. If you do that, I'll then come back with your family and say, look, Muriagwe, this is your family. They came to my place because of this. What is the problem? Can I be of help? So I think I've made my point about dragging SADC into it.
Very good
We
point.
want to bring them. They must start and questioning President Mnangagwa and say, please, please, 2028, you are leaving. You have had 10 years in office, and then allow elections, free and fair elections in 2028, and let Zimbabwe function. That will be my closing. So going forward, you have talked about the war veterans, Professor Mandas. Thank you for the platform. It fits well with number 4, point number 4 from Reverend Dr. Mtat. Going to our institutions, they should not be captured. So we have taken these challenges to the courts because we believe, and I've said that at the last press conference, I don't believe that we don't have courts here. We still have courts here. And in certain matters, our courts will stand to the occasion. So we want to use our challenges to demonstrate that this constitutional court is not captured. It cannot be captured in interpreting very simple provisions of the Constitution, which says that if you want to amend the Constitution, the incumbent shall not benefit. So which judge in this world will say that doesn't mean that? And which judge in this world will believe that I'm not sure whether I shouldn't call it nonsensical. It is something else. This thing of saying we are not changing term limits, but we are giving the president more time in office. Instead of him leaving after 5 years, he will be there for another, and that we are not doing anything. People must not characterize that as an argument. Not so you shouldn't call it. It's not a legal argument, let alone an argument. So let's not reach the level of calling it a legal argument. It is not an argument. So we don't even have to say is it a legal argument. It is not. So there is no judge, and I must say this very clearly. There is no judge in this country, no matter what they do, who will accept that argument. Look at this. Whenever people exchange legal opinions, you can do that. But you must look at what sort of opinion will persuade a judge. The opinions that are being circulated by the movers of this bill will not persuade any judge in the Constitutional Court. There are 7 of them. And I can tell the public that. So the cases we are taking to the courts are not really, they are meant to demonstrate that the institutions of state, especially the judiciary, must not be captured to a certain level. In this case, they won't. I think they would, even if they might find excuses here, but they cannot come to a situation where they will not agree with us that a referendum would be required. So we have several challenges. The one that we have put before the court now is simple. It says that a president, not President Mnangagwa, a president who swears an oath and says, I will uphold the Constitution, cannot sit in a meeting that is meant to change that Constitution. Not only change it, but to lengthen his stay in office. He was elected, and when he took oath following an election, which was electing people who were going to the electorate to say, we want 5 years. Please give me the mandate to govern you for 5 years. That is what the presidential campaign was all about. Then after getting that 5-year mandate, you go around and sit around with people and say, look, I want now 2 more years, but I won't go back to the people that elected me. I'm just going to get it with a few friends, because that's what this amendment is all about. It's a few friends that are sitting around and saying, we will give you, and we'll not go back to the people. then we are saying to the Constitutional Court, such a president would have breached his constitutional duties. That's what we are saying. He has certain duties, which is to uphold the Constitution. And I think that is the point. So I believe that the courts will not, the courts will not do that. So I must be on record, Professor Madaza and colleagues, for saying that I believe that our courts are not captured that far. The way the debate has been, they are not captured that way far. They don't wear those gowns for nothing. Or when we say court rise, that's when they come in. We have to get the dog up and then we all rise. We don't rise for nothing. We don't rise for nothing. They are not ZANU-PF operators. They are there sitting, and there's a limit to which they will be. In this particular case, the movers of this bill, they will fail. It won't succeed. This bill will not. It will be stopped either by the courts or by the people.
Yeah, yes. Thank you very much indeed. And that's coming from a constitutional lawyer, professor of constitutional law, the leading constitutional lawyer, not only in Zimbabwe, but on the globe. So we take a lot of comfort from what you are saying, Professor Madhuku.
Thank you.
Yes, and we did. And I think I dare say no more than that, except to thank the panelists, Professor Madhuku, Reverend Mutata, Francis, Lovemore, and Brian Raptopoulos for one of the most interesting and one of the most moving of policy dialogues, especially on this subject. And we've emerged with 5 resolutions. And one, please, that the modified number 4, Professor Madhuku called on the church, Reverend Mutata, on the church to lead us, to unite us. All the various groups, all of us. I would like you to take that request, Reverend Mutata, to your colleagues at ZCC. And we are prepared for that. I think they will know better, and you know, Reverend Mutata, that over the years we have been working with you, always trying to put the church at the center, and you have taken leadership, whether inadvertently or by design. The statement you made last week, the heads of denominations, it's a powerful, powerful speech. And I cited it at the beginning of this meeting. And in it was a reference to the head of state, as an appeal to the head of state to throw aside this amendment. It's not in his interests. And Professor Madhuku has highlighted in the court challenge they're making that he's already breaching the Constitution when he should be defending the Constitution by discussing a breach to the Constitution from which he will benefit directly himself. So I think, I believe that even as a lawyer himself, and someone I've worked with, and in 2000, he will see the light as he should. And I've been betting with my colleagues that he will, in fact, withdraw this amendment to the chagrin of those who are pushing it. We know who are pushing it. It's less those who are to benefit from this very unconstitutional trajectory. So on that note, I want to thank you again, and thank the 800 people who have joined us today, to thank Rumbi and Censored, who has been running this program parallel through a platform, for the fantastic work, and we should continue working that way. So all of you who have joined us from across the world, in our diaspora out there, South Africa, the UK, North America, Australasia, and even the moon, as I said to somebody the other day, you will find Zimbabweans everywhere, School in the Moon. Thank you very much. Till we meet again on this subject, goodbye.
Africa.